Hey everyone, so this will be like the last discussion video regarding security contracting in the federal defense, paramilitary, private military sphere. Um, there's a couple of other, I've put a couple of other videos out, and there's a couple of other good videos out there from Ivan with Kit Badger, a friend that I've made with the channel called Fall Off the Map. He's a electrician contractor who is an expat working living in South America. There's also Asymmetrical Athlete, a friend of mine, and then contractor companies, websites like overseas channels and websites like Overseas Contractor Academy with Contractor Ken, and my buddy Kevin with Vets to PSC, and he's kind of moved on from that. And that's part of what we're going to talk about now today. Also Benny Winslow, who's also a former contractor and Navy guy. A couple of those guys with some really good channels that talk about this kind of stuff, in particular when it comes to private military contracting, federal security contracting, and things like that. So, last video about that as far as in a discussion capacity and in that depth. So, Ivan's put out the pros and cons of contracting. Kit Badger's put out pros and cons of contracting. And I've talked about the pros before and what the requirements are. In large, nowadays with contracting, a lot has changed over the years. And it is much more competitive and more difficult to get in now than it used to be. Partly because of regulation, policy changes, requirements, criteria, training, everything across the board. Today we're going to talk about the cons more so, and why it's good to spend a little time contracting, make your money, and get out and go to either private clients and private sector, private client, like solely private sector stuff, or just moving on from there. Some of the biggest cons, especially with overseas defense contracting and private military contracting and stuff, is you work very long hours, and you will work some dog shit hours. Absolutely. You will be tasked out as well to a bunch of random details that aren't necessarily part of your contract criteria. There's a lot of stopgaps that need to be filled that the private sector and private security companies end up filling those roles, to include defensive designated marksman or defensive sniper capabilities, as well as a myriad of other taskings and readiness directives, such as QRF, quick reactionary forces, and things like that. I was on an ERT, an emergency response team. It used to be called a TST, a tactical support team. It's also been called a number of other things. Now it's called an ERT or just QRF. That was a big part of what I did in that capacity. You will get tasked out to a bunch of stuff and end up halfway across the country that you're working in doing other things, taking away from the primary objectives and away from where your housing is and things like that. And you're going to spend long hours and sometimes days out there doing that job. Additionally, yeah, the money's good. It can be good anyway, but that's one of those things you have to deal with. Apart from pretty dog shit hours working, a lot of the time you can expect to work anywhere between 12 and 18 hours, get a little bit of a sleep cycle, and then you're back on it. And then it's a rotational kind of thing. Usually it's a couple of days at a time where you're working, and then you'll have a day or two off, and then cycle back in with the actual contract rotations of about 3 months on site, 1 month on off site, generally. It depends. There's a couple of different contracts that you can work in that capacity. So realize that too. In the off time, like in that month off, you're not being paid, but you're making some good money when you're on that time cycle and that contract cycle. So it's one of those kind of pros and cons as well. You can go do whatever the hell you want in that off time. If you want to go travel or whatever, but you have to be back by a certain date and things like that. You cannot be late. And don't fucking get yourself into trouble if you're planning to try and stay on contract for that time. Stay out of fucking trouble. Stay out of dangerous crime-ridden places too. If you want to go if you're on a contract in Iraq, for example, and you want to go take a vacation in Mexico, I would not recommend doing that right now, or in recent past. That's not a good vacation to take. Nor is it, some other places for obvious reasons. Go enjoy France or whatever. Go frickin', live it up in Peru or something for a week. Whatever it is. Other cons, apart from crazy long hours and lack of sleep, which will build and will affect you physically and mentally. There's that physical breakdown too. You're wearing a lot of kit all the time. Your hips, back, and everything are gonna suck. You have fitness requirements, especially for overseas contracts. You have to maintain a physical standard. Stateside, not so much. The last 3-year contract that I was on, physical fitness assessment test was only at your 3 to 5 year medical screenings for renewal of your work contract. Drug tests can be randomized and periodic, not as common as some people would think. That might be a stopgap, or that might be something that's lacking within the company, depending on which one it is, whatever. That's another thing there. Standardization, good and bad. A lot of bad that comes with it. You're going to get subpar equipment, and I've talked about this before, and I've shown it with my loadout videos with equipment. Like, there is equipment that is subpar. Some you can supplement, some you can't, because of uniformity and standardization and everything with that. So that could be a big pain in the ass too, and you just either have to suck it up and deal with it, or if it's really like some vital equipment that's bad and is going to get you fucking killed because it doesn't work, you might need to move on. And I talked about that in the last video. You might need to make the choice to either speak up or move along to something better. Bureaucracy, company bureaucracy. A lot of higher leadership are yes men. They just want to keep their job and make that paycheck. There can be a big communications breakdowns too, with leadership up the chain. It can be problematic. The last company I was with had a fairly solid communications linkage when it came to like ethics reporting and like things like that, or like serious questions. Most of the time they would get back to me within a fairly appropriate time frame of just a couple of days. But a lot of the time you're not really hearing anything at all from upper leadership and like captain level and senior administrators and things like that. You're not hearing much from them unless there's like a big pay issue or something. Most of the time you're just dealing directly with your senior team leader, your lieutenant, whatever it is. And there's kind of a divide and a disparity between your line unit forces and your leadership administration seniority. That's a big problem. Always has been. It can be a problem. It's a problem in the military too, but it's a problem in the private sector too, especially with large companies that are managing so much at in so many places all at once. Kind of goes back to the asset thing there too. Pay, not as good as it used to be. I'll say it flat out. It is not as good as it used to be. Especially if you're not like a former like Secret Squirrel guy, Tier 1 Special Forces guy. Pay is not there. I mean, I've had some pretty well-paying gigs, but it's not what you're seeing and hearing about a lot of these guys that are in the more specialized contracts and things like your OGA, other government agency contracts and things like that. A lot of your standard PSD, protective security details, and then ERTs, like what I was doing and stuff, you're making a lot more in line of in that PSS realm, protective security specialist, and PSO, protective security officer realm. You're making more than what like a static armed guard PSO is going to make, but you're not making nearly what like OGA guys are making or anything. So the money is not quite what it was even 10 years ago. And taxes have gone up, both in the countries that you're working in, especially in conflict zones and things like that, and also domestically. We see what's going on with taxes, and we see what's going on with inflation. You're just less money is getting into your pockets. Be smart about your finances and save up money. That's really all I can say about that. It's just there are pay issues apart from quality of equipment and things like that. I've already talked in the past video about criteria and what they require and things like that nowadays. That's really a big part of it. Is you're gonna work dog shit hours, and it's gonna wear your body and mind out. You're gonna have disconnect with leadership and administration in your companies, especially the bigger the company is. You're going to have subpar equipment. Companies just trying to save money wherever they can because they have more and more people to outfit the bigger the company is, and just their contract and acquisitions and everything, and some of those people, I'm sorry, are just not qualified to be in those positions based on the equipment that we're given. Issues with pay and things like that. I mean, you get 401k now and everything, which is cool. You're good to go with that. Some of those benefits are really nice, and domestic contracts, you're getting mileage pay and everything like that. But pay otherwise is not nearly as good as it used to be. And finally, probably right now, the biggest bear in the room is the fucking government administration and the government in general and the agencies and everything you're having to deal with. That's why I left federal, private military, federal and defense private security contracting in the federal sector. That is one of the biggest reasons why I left. Besides all these other things that just piled on with just not being favorable within the company. I guess another side with company level stuff, getting a transfer could be very difficult, especially right now. It's extremely competitive, and I said this before. Last contract I was working, I was trying to transfer to get back overseas, and company was just stonewalling and playing fuck games and everything else. And I was talking to another company and trying to start a work a packet and everything, and then Afghanistan happened, the pullout happened, and that fell through. And I was really pissed off because I was on an ERT at that time, as well as doing what I was doing for a domestic contract, and that plays into the government right now. And I would say getting into that gig right now, stand firm on your principles. You know, you want to get into the gig, make your money and get out. That's my advice to you. Make your money and get out at this point. Don't try and stay there longer than you need to and find greener pastures. Whether it's another contracting gig, whether it's more on the I guess pseudo-volunteer side. If you want to go join the Foreign Legion in Ukraine, do it. You know, if that's what you want to do, if you want to see some action and things like that, that's the way to go. But with security contractors, there's just more and more regulation and everything else, and you got the government breathing down your neck, and just the nature of the government right now is it is not favorable. It is not savory, and it is not favorable to be working for a contract for them right now. It really is not. They're pulling some bullshit on people and on American citizens and things like that, and I don't agree with it. Apart from the companies being just yes people, and they're fighting to keep these contracts, but they're being yes people, and they're going along with it, with all this bullshit that the government's trying to pull, and can't agree with it. Sorry, can't agree with it. You got to have some principles. Otherwise, you are not going to be looked at in a good light. You know, it's problematic right now, and you want to get in it, make your money and get out. Find something better. Find a different career. You know, pursue a different profession after you've made some money and getting out of that game. These companies have high turnover rates anyway because of a lot of these issues, but also, you know, a lot of people, that's a mindset. You can make your money and get out. You know, Kevin from Vets PSC, he's said the same thing lately, so I was catching up with him. He's moved on. He's not in contracting anymore, and he was former Green Beret, high-level stuff, and he's moved on from that. So it's not just more of your line unit PSD ERT guys like myself, but it's your OGA guys too. They're making their money and they're getting out. And whether you want to look at what happened in Benghazi with the GRS guys, and they're working directly under the Special Activities Group for the agency, you know, with GRS, or strictly on the company side with these contracts, OGA contracts, and then standard WIPs, Worldwide Protective Services contracts, and Federal Protective Service contracts, and all these other contracts, DOE contracts, and everything else. Make your money and get out. Because at this point, it's good to get that experience and get those skills learned and everything, but it is it's not advantageous to try and stick it out unless you can work your way up in the company, which, another factor, is extremely difficult to fucking do. To get into high level leadership and administration roles and everything like that. You gotta have high-end degrees for that kind of stuff, or have a lot of years in. And at this point, getting those years in is just not, it's not savory. It's not favorable with the government right now. So that's, I'll just pretty much kind of cover it there and kind of end it with that. Is there's a lot of those issues, and they just seem to be getting worse. Apart from the government getting fucking worse too, and these contracts are just getting shittier and shittier, and less obtainable, just because of the shrinkage that's going on right now. We're not in Afghanistan anymore. We're not in a couple other places anymore. They are popping up in other places, but again, more specialized. So you need to have the experience and criteria to meet to be able to get in those positions for those locations. If you want to get into these jobs, these companies have their job listings open on their websites where you can go apply. Go check them out. Otherwise, check out websites like Silent Professionals and Shooter Jobs that post. It's just a posting board of all these different jobs. Clearance Jobs is another one where you can go look at these gigs if you want to get into this game. Otherwise, find another way to get some experience and you know, and whatnot. You may not make as much money, and even then, again, pay's not great anymore. Make your money, save up some money, build your 401k, and then get out. Yeah. Last video I'm going to make on contracting in this capacity. Not to be the negative Nancy, but those are the cons, and this is the advice that a lot of us are going to give you guys, is make your money and get out. So, yeah, with that, on to better things and greener pastures. Metal up, stay adaptive, and stay lethal. Out.